Hello everyone, Ben here, and welcome back to my election predictions. This is going to be the last election prediction I do before I start reviewing the Democrat primary. And I think I'm going to review the other two. After that, at some point, I'm going to review the other two, the two gubernatorial races that are going on in November this year, that will be voted on in November. In addition, I probably will do at some point an election night of Elizabeth Warren versus Donald Trump. It won't be too different from my prediction video on Warren versus Trump, but a few things might be different because in election night I, take a little bit more effort and I put in a scenario that can actually affect, which swing states actually swing. Anyway, so we're covering Russ Feingold of Wisconsin. He's a former senator there, versus Donald Trump. And the reason why is because I saw him mentioned in an election chat that back in 2016 on 538 as a potential candidate by Nate Silver. And normally I don't, take those things too seriously, but I thought about it and, on paper at least he's a good candidate to run in that area, to run and try and recapture the Rust Belt, which the Democrats need to win in order to actually win the election. They need to at least flip one state back. And the easiest state for them is Michigan. And I'm going to kind of go into why. But if we look at it, and let's assume the Republicans win those states, they only need to hold Arizona in order to win the election. They don't need Florida. But let's go back. And that's why it's so important for the Democrats to actually fight in this area, in the Rust Belt. Because as it stands, there's currently 10, 20, 40, 62, 80 votes. There's 80 votes at stake in the Rust Belt. And last year the Republicans took 70. By the way, the Republicans don't even need Arizona if they're able to capture New Hampshire in this scenario. So the Rust Belt, it still has a lot of power. Yes, is population shifting away from the Rust Belt? Yeah, not going to deny it. But it's important for the Democrats to fight there. And the reason why it's important, why I think Michigan is the most likely state to flip back to the Democrats, is because it was the most narrow margin of victory for Trump. In addition, Pennsylvania, I know, some people may question why I keep saying it's going to stay red in 2020, but if you look at Pennsylvania, I don't see where they're getting additional votes. I don't, because turnout in Pennsylvania was similar to previous years in 2016. And Hillary ran up the margins, at least according to theory, what she needed to in Philadelphia. And she won all of the Philly suburbs as well. Montgomery County, Chester County, Delaware County, I forget what the other one is, Bucks County. She won all of those by varying margins. She narrowly won Bucks, I will say that. So I don't see how Democrats are going to be able to flip Pennsylvania back under, a normal, what I would expect to happen under a Trump presidency for the next 3.5 years. I don't see where the votes are coming from, even with someone from the Rust Belt. I just don't see it happening. But I'll get to Pennsylvania in a bit, because we need to talk about home state advantage. And yes, home state advantage is a very real thing. Prime example would be former governor and, of course, former President Bill Clinton winning his home state of Arkansas, along with a few other southern states. You know, But home state advantage has never flipped an election, and in fact, a decent amount of people have lost their home state. It's not impossible to lose your home state. And especially for someone like Russ Feingold, could he easily win Wisconsin? Yeah, but it's going to be a very, very narrow margin. I really don't, if he were to run, I don't think the margin would be outside of half a point. It'd be well within that, maybe even 0.3 of a point. And that's because he's lost 2 elections for Senate in his home state. Both to Ron Johnson. First, when Ron Johnson was the challenger, so he defeated the incumbent Russ Feingold. And then Ron Johnson held off the challenge from Russ Feingold by a decent margin. And I think this is showing the trend that Wisconsin may just be soon to be just a red state, period. Not even a red leaning swing state or a red leaning battleground state. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt in Wisconsin for right now, and I'll come back to it, but I don't think Iowa or Ohio are flipping. Same thing with North Carolina and Georgia. I just don't think Russ Feingold is the correct candidate for these states. I don't think he's charismatic enough to get the type of turnout he needs in North Carolina, and I don't think he'd be able to even come close in Georgia. I think it'd be a 7 or 8 point margin of victory for Trump. Well, let's talk about some of the other swing states. Arizona, I think the margin of victory would be about the same as 2016, maybe a little narrower or a little wider. It just depends on on a ton of things. New Mexico would go blue. Oops, that was not what I wanted. Dang it. And actually, I think Trump would improve his margin of victory to well over 10 points. Okay, that's the button I meant to hit. Close. And I'm leaning states because that allows me to show you where exactly I think the battlegrounds will be. I don't think New Mexico is really going to be in play. Arizona will be within 5 points. Let's just get that out of the way. Nevada, I don't think much will change in the Southwest. I really don't. So those, it's going to be these 3 states are all within 5 points. Ohio, I think Trump is able to expand that to an actual 10-point margin of victory. And now we get on to a lot of the states. I think Virginia, Trump ran surprisingly strong in this state. And I'll get to this, but I think if the governor's election goes the way I think it's going to go, now that I look at it, not just from, a data standpoint, but also from how well Gillespie's ads are doing, at least from what I can see, and from kind of how weak I think Northam is as a candidate. If the governor's election goes to Gillespie, I actually think that Republicans stand a decent chance of winning Virginia in 2020, even with Trump. A generic Republican would probably carry the state outright, by a decent margin, like 3 points. But I'm going to go ahead and give Trump the narrow victory. It really depends on who the running mate is for Feingold, but I'll give Trump the narrow victory in Virginia. I think he'd hold on to Florida, and that already gives him the election. For those of you who remember, this is extremely similar to the Bush-Gore map in 2000, except instead of New Hampshire, it's this one vote in Maine, though it doesn't even matter. You don't even need New Hampshire and Maine, and Bush would still win by even more votes than in 2000. But anyway, so let's move on to the Rust Belt. I don't think anything would change in New Hampshire and Maine. I don't think anything would change too dramatically. I think Russ Feingold would be able to hold off the challenge there. But let's talk about the Rust Belt. Minnesota, I'll keep that blue. I'll give Feingold the benefit of the doubt, but Minnesota is definitely trending Republican, as is this entire region. Not including Virginia. But, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota, all of those states have been trending Republican. And, they voted more Republican than the nation for the past couple of elections. So it's kind of tough to predict where they will fall with someone from Wisconsin running. But home state advantage does mean something. And I'll go ahead and give Feingold the benefit of the doubt. Probably tons and tons and tons of recalls in the state. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. In the state of Michigan, I think having someone from Wisconsin would be enough to flip the state back just barely, though. And Pennsylvania, I think it's too far away from Wisconsin for them to have any effect from them in terms of, they are from my, they're from my region, but I think Pennsylvania would hold on. Feingold would definitely narrow the gap, but I don't think it would be enough to overcome that 74,000 vote lead that Trump managed to create just by winning a few extra counties out west and flipping a few counties in this area of Pennsylvania, in the rural T area. He would probably even maybe flip Centerville, but it depends. I don't know. But I'm having a hard time seeing where Feingold is making up those extra votes. Could it happen? Of course. Anything could happen. But I'm not sure where I'm seeing those extra votes. Maybe he wins a few. Maybe he flips Erie back. But I don't think. But he could lose Scranton or no, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and he'll hold Scranton and just flip Erie back. But that's about it. I really don't see him improving enough in the rural areas of the state to overcome the enthusiasm for Trump in the state. And I'm honestly surprised I'm saying that because, 3 years ago we were talking about how Pennsylvania was kind of like the football, and the Democrats were Lucy, always holding it out for Charlie Brown and the Republicans, and then pulling it away at the very last second. But now we're talking about maybe even the opposite effect. where Pennsylvania may have just flipped Republican, at least, and become a red-leaning swing state. I don't even know. Pennsylvania is way too close to call, in my opinion. It could go either way, so I want to leave it blank, even though it doesn't matter for the outcome of the election. Then again, Virginia could matter too, so it could wind up looking like this, or it could wind up looking like this. You know, let's give Russ Feingold the benefit of the doubt and say he'll win Pennsylvania. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he recaptures the Rust Belt. But I think the trade-off would be you lose Virginia or maybe a southwestern state. But I think Virginia is the most likely of the two, of one of the two. And remember, if you won Virginia, the Republican would have to capture Colorado. So it'd be Virginia that would put Trump over the top. But I think that Trump would win this election. It just depends on a few details. For example, how well he performs in Maine, whether or not Russ Feingold is able to recapture at least whether Russ Feingold is able to recapture these states, and who wins Virginia. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.